My name is Joe Foster, and this happened 3 years ago in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. At the time, I was 27 and living alone in a small rental house on a street where almost everyone knew each other. Nothing exciting ever happened there. Most nights were peaceful. That's why what happened stood out so much. It started with a man standing across the street. The first time I noticed him was around 10:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was watching TV when I got up to grab a drink. As I walked past the front window, I saw someone standing under a streetlight directly across from my house. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there. I assumed he was waiting for someone. The next night he was back. Same spot, same dark jacket, same still posture. This time I watched him for several minutes. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't smoking. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was facing my house. I closed the curtains and tried not to think about it. But over the next week, I kept seeing him. Sometimes at 9 p.m., sometimes after midnight. Always across the street. Always looking toward my house. I started feeling uncomfortable every time darkness fell. One Friday night, my friend Kevin came over to watch a game. When I mentioned the strange guy, Kevin walked to the window. "Yeah, that's creepy," he said. The man was there, standing perfectly still beneath the streetlight. Kevin opened the front door and shouted, "Hey, you need something?" The man immediately turned and walked away. Not fast, not slow, just calmly disappeared around the corner. That should have been the end of it. Instead, things got worse. The following Monday, I came home from work and found muddy footprints near my bedroom window. At first, I thought they belonged to a neighbor. Then I realized they stopped directly beneath the window, like someone had stood there, watching. My stomach dropped. That night, I checked every lock twice. Around 1 a.m., I woke up thirsty. The house was silent. As I walked toward the kitchen, I glanced through a gap in the curtains. The man was there again, across the street, staring. The sight instantly woke me up. I watched him for almost a minute. Then something happened that still makes my skin crawl. He slowly raised one arm and pointed directly at my bedroom window. I stepped back so fast I nearly fell. When I looked again, he was gone. The next morning, I bought a security camera. A few days passed without incident. Then on Saturday morning, I reviewed footage from the previous night. At 2:14 a.m., the camera recorded someone walking onto my property. The same man. He approached the side of the house and disappeared from view. A minute later, he returned and walked away. My hands were shaking. I called the police. They took a report, but said there wasn't enough evidence to identify him. For a while, the camera seemed to keep him away. I didn't see him again for nearly 2 weeks. Then one rainy evening, everything changed. I was eating dinner when my phone alerted me to motion outside. I opened the camera app. The man was standing across the street, looking directly at the house. But this time he wasn't alone. There was another figure standing beside him. Both were staring at my home. Neither moved. Neither spoke. For nearly 10 minutes they remained there, watching. Then both walked away into the darkness. I barely slept that night. I had no idea that the worst part was still coming. The next afternoon, I decided to speak with my elderly neighbor, Linda. She had lived on the street for over 20 years and seemed to know everyone. When I described the man, her expression immediately changed. "Dark jacket?" she asked. I nodded. "Usually stands under the streetlight." I nodded again. Linda went pale. Then she told me something I wasn't expecting. Several years earlier, another man who lived in my rental house had repeatedly reported someone watching him from across the street. Neighbors had seen the same figure. Police investigated, but never identified anyone. Eventually, the resident moved away. The sightings stopped, at least until I moved in. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Around midnight, I checked every camera feed. Everything looked normal. At 1:37 a.m., an alert appeared. Motion detected. Front yard. I opened the feed. My blood froze. The man wasn't across the street. He was standing beside my mailbox, closer than he'd ever been before. His face was hidden beneath a hood. For almost 30 seconds, he simply stared at the house. Then he slowly walked toward the front door. I immediately called 911. As I spoke with dispatch, I watched him climb the porch steps. He leaned toward the front window, looking inside, trying to see me. Then he suddenly turned and walked away. Police arrived within minutes, but he was gone. The officers searched the area and found nothing. I barely slept. At sunrise, I stepped outside. Something was resting against my front door, a folded piece of paper. My hands trembled as I opened it. There was only one sentence written inside. "I finally know when you're alone." I felt sick. The police treated the note seriously and increased patrols. For several days, nothing happened. Then one evening, an officer called me. They had identified a vehicle connected to suspicious activity near my neighborhood. Apparently, multiple residents had reported seeing it parked nearby late at night. The plate led to a man named Gregory Wells. He lived nearly 40 minutes away. Police obtained a warrant and searched his property. What they found was horrifying. Inside his garage were hundreds of photographs, many taken from long distances. Dozens showed houses, windows, residents inside their homes. Some photographs were of me, pictures taken through my bedroom window, through my living room window, even while I was eating dinner. The oldest photo was dated almost 6 months earlier, months before I had ever noticed him. Investigators believed he spent years driving through neighborhoods searching for people living alone. Then he would watch them, study their routines, learn when they left, learn when they slept, learn when they were vulnerable. The second person seen with him was another man helping collect information. Thankfully, both were arrested before anything worse happened. Even now, years later, I keep my curtains closed after dark. People often think being watched is harmless, that if someone never enters your house, there's no real danger. I used to think that too, until I learned someone had been standing across the street for months learning everything about me while I had no idea. The part that still scares me most isn't the photographs. It isn't the note. It's realizing that every night I looked outside and saw him standing under that streetlight. He wasn't deciding whether to watch me. He already had been. My name is Brandon Pierce, and this happened in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, in October of 2022. I was 28 and living alone in a small rental house on a quiet residential street. The neighborhood was the kind of place where people waved from their driveways and kids rode bikes until sunset. Directly across from my house sat an old 2-story home that had been empty for months. At least that's what everyone thought. One rainy Tuesday night, I was working late on my laptop in the living room. Around 11:30 p.m., I got up to make coffee and glanced through my front window. That's when I noticed a figure standing inside the empty house. The person was upstairs, completely still, just staring out the window. I froze. The room behind them was dark, making the silhouette impossible to identify. I assumed it was a realtor or maybe a contractor checking the property. Still, something felt wrong. The figure wasn't moving, not even slightly. I watched for nearly a minute. Then suddenly the silhouette stepped backward into darkness and disappeared. I didn't think much of it after that, until the next night. At exactly the same time, I looked across the street and saw the figure again. Same window, same position, watching my house. A chill ran through me. I grabbed my phone and zoomed in with the camera. The image was grainy, but I could clearly tell the person was facing directly toward me, not looking down the street, not looking elsewhere, at me. I told myself it was coincidence. Yet over the following week, the figure appeared every single night, always between 11 p.m. and midnight, always standing perfectly still, watching. One evening, I mentioned it to my neighbor Greg. He looked confused. "The house is locked up," he said. "No one's supposed to be in there." The next afternoon, Greg and I walked over together. The property looked abandoned. The mailbox was overflowing. Leaves covered the porch. The front door had a lockbox attached for real estate showings. We peeked through windows. Nobody inside. Nothing unusual. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made things worse. Because that night, the figure returned. I started keeping my curtains closed, but curiosity kept pulling me back. Every night, I'd sneak a look. Every night, they were there, standing motionless, watching. Then things escalated. One Friday morning, I opened my front door and found a photograph on the porch. It was a picture of my house, taken from across the street. The image looked recent. My stomach dropped. There was no note, no message, nothing, just a photo. I called the police. An officer came by, took a report, and checked the vacant property. According to him, nobody was inside. No signs of forced entry. No evidence of anyone living there. The officer suggested a prank. I wanted to believe him, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. That weekend, I installed security cameras around my house. The first 2 nights showed nothing unusual. Then on the third night, I woke around 2 a.m. after hearing a notification from my phone. One of the cameras had detected movement. I opened the app. The footage showed someone standing in the middle of the street, directly in front of my house. They were facing my front window, not moving, not doing anything, just standing there, watching. The timestamp showed 1:57 a.m. I stared at the screen in disbelief. After nearly 3 minutes, the person slowly turned and walked back toward the vacant house. The camera lost sight of them as they reached the property. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I reviewed more footage. What I found made my blood run cold. The person hadn't come from down the street. They had emerged from the backyard of the supposedly empty house. That evening, I parked my truck a few houses away and waited. I wanted answers. Around 11:15 p.m., a light appeared upstairs in the vacant home. A faint yellow glow. Then the silhouette stepped into view. The same figure, watching my house again. I called the police immediately. This time 2 officers arrived. I pointed toward the window. They saw it too. For the first time, I felt relieved. Finally, someone else witnessed it. The officers approached the property while I remained outside. I watched flashlights move through the house. Minutes passed. Then one officer emerged and motioned me over. The figure was gone, but they had discovered something far worse. Someone had been secretly living inside the house. There was a sleeping bag in an upstairs bedroom, food wrappers, water bottles, flashlights, and dozens of photographs. Photographs of me, hundreds of them. Some show me mowing my lawn, taking out trash, bringing groceries inside, even sleeping on my couch through my living room window. I felt sick. The officers searched the property thoroughly, but couldn't locate the person. Whoever they were had escaped through a rear basement exit. I thought the nightmare was over. I was wrong. 3 nights later, I woke to a faint tapping sound. Tap, 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 coming from somewhere outside. I checked my bedroom window. Nothing. The tapping continued. I followed the sound downstairs. It seemed to be coming from the front door. My hand shook as I looked through the peephole. Nobody there. Then I noticed something. A photograph lying on the welcome mat. I waited until sunrise before opening the door. The photo showed me standing at that very peephole, looking outside, taken only hours earlier. My knees nearly gave out. The police launched a larger investigation. They reviewed nearby cameras and eventually identified a suspect, a 43-year-old man named Kevin Mercer. He had a history of stalking offenses in another state and had apparently been squatting in vacant homes for years. Authorities believed he became obsessed with random people he watched from windows. I happened to become one of those people. The most disturbing discovery came later. Investigators found a notebook hidden inside the abandoned house. Most of it contained observations about my daily routine. When I left for work, when I came home, what lights I used, when I slept. One entry still haunts me. It simply read, "He finally noticed me." Kevin was arrested 2 months later in another city after breaking into an empty property. The case never went to trial because he accepted a plea deal. I moved away shortly afterward. Even now, years later, I still check windows before going to bed. I still look across streets. I still wonder how long he had been watching before I first saw him. And sometimes the thing that scares me most isn't that someone was staring from across the street. It's knowing that for weeks I stared back.